So I will start. Hello everyone, very nice to be here in EVO NXT in Milan first time. My name is Philip. I'm working for the German association BFTG, association founded in 2015, so we're getting 10 this year and we're celebrating this. Myself, I'm in the business since 14 years now. So starting in business 2011, so it was the early stage, and we made, you know, the whole travel when it's coming to regulation in the EU, ups and downs. And I think we have a wonderful discussion about this today with very much experts here, and I'm looking forward to that. Me, myself, I'm a vapor since 2013. I switched to vaping actually attending an exhibition of tobacco in Dortmund. It was my last cigarette, and I've never tried it again because of the big advantages of vaping. We were talking about that.
Great, thank you so much for the introduction. Yes, Jacoba, thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Jacobo Druan. I'm a partner at EPA, EPPA. EPA is a Brussels-based consultancy firm. We are specialized in public affairs and regulatory affairs for highly regulated sectors. It's basically, I would say, our specialization in the last over 37 years of existence. Me, myself, I've been particularly working in this sector of nicotine products already for a bit over a decade. So not maybe as long as my colleague Peter here, but sufficient to get to know a little bit what has been ongoing, what have been the different changes over the last years, and what are the trends, and seeing a little bit, and humbly, thank you very much. I'll be trying to contribute to this debate today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter.
Okay, we have two functional mics, great. So my name is Peter Beckett and I run clearingtheair.eu. We're the premier European news source for vapors and nicotine consumers, and we're very upfront with what we believe about how safer nicotine products have a very this great public health potential that we feel is being missed by politicians. And our view is that if more consumers know about what's going on, then they can take better action. I also run a public affairs firm at which I'm a partner. It's called 361. When you can't afford them, you come to us.
Thank you, and Chris, please.
Hi, Chris Allen, CEO of Broughton. We're a global contract research organisation. Primary focus area is analytical and toxicology. We entered into the vapor space back in 2010. We worked on a licensed medicinal product that then took us into the consumer sector. So we followed that whole story through from when MHRA originally said in the UK that any nicotine-containing products would be licensed as medicinal. We then saw the Tobacco Products Directive came in, and I think even right back in the early days we were working with yourself, Peter, trying to make sense of this, guide companies through it, provide them the right test data, and we've continued to do that since. And I think this directive is clearly overdue a review. When that's going to happen, I think we're all, if you asked us 5 years ago, I think we'd all be sat here thinking it's going to be in place, and we'd be talking about TPD4. And I think this is just a great example of how a regulation has not adapted to consumer needs. It's not giving consumers the products that they actually want. It's not being enforced properly. We're not seeing correct review of the applications. And I think there is in a lot of instances, a very sort of grey area and fine line between what is actually a legal product and what's an illicit product, with people just not following the spirit of the regulation.
So just to give a little bit of context, this is the 728th panel that Chris and I have been on, talking about the next round of the Tobacco Directive.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Actually, I want to say it's a big honor for me to be present today with you, because we have a top-notch expert team. And I welcome all of you to the panel. So as we dive into this critical conversation, which is of interest to many representatives of the industry, we will explore some aspects of evolving regulatory landscape of nicotine products under TPD. We are at a critical juncture where we need to speak about balancing compliance with TPD, protecting public health, ensuring market access for responsible businesses, and fostering innovation for the industry. For the nicotine pouches industry, the critical points revolve around balancing compliance, maintaining market viability, and addressing public goals. The industry must navigate challenges while innovating. I'm sorry, I forgot to switch the slide. Well, to meet consumer demands and regulatory expectations. We will have some background on the slides, but primarily the questions will be asked the experts, and I kindly ask you to just not to reply your questions, but participate in the discussion, because opinion of each of you matters. Thank you. So the first question actually will be addressed to Peter, and it comes to regulatory harmonization. If we talk about TPD3, the priority of TPD3 is harmonization across the European Union. If we talk about the current fragmented regulatory environment, it complicates operations of companies operating in multiple countries. Misaligned or delayed harmonization could disadvantage certain markets and create regulatory uncertainty. Taking this into account, how do you think, how far could the harmonization go, and what significant changes can it pose to the industry in comparison with TPD2? It would be great if you could outline where we are in the current legislative process.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah,
you want to?
maybe.
I mean, they said Peter, but sorry. So let's take a big step back for a second. The last time that we went through a legislative process to revise European tobacco law was in 2013. I was significantly younger and significantly thinner back then, and the debate hasn't changed at all in the last 13 years. If we are to get a new directive, we'll see a consultation that the Commission will bring forward to ostensibly get people's views on what needs to be changed. They will then go away, put that into draft legislation, which will end up in the European Parliament and the European Council will have to decide. Jacobo and I have been discussing timelines. I think the outcome of that discussion is we don't know, but my core thoughts on it are we need to take a further step back to look at where we are globally and politically. Yesterday, Donald Trump just decided that the entire vaping debate doesn't matter in America because all devices are going to have a 54% tariff on them, but cigarettes are made in America. So we're in a global moment where we're dealing with big transitional issues. And I think the question that political institutions really need to ask themselves is this really the moment to do something so petty as to piss off a load of people who just want to quit smoking? I'm not sure it is, and I think that message resonates with people who think about politics in a broader way. Step back down from that, the question has to be, what actually needs to change? Is there a genuine problem here to fix? Do we have lots and lots of unsafe product on the market that we can regulate out of existence? And the answer is probably not. The answer is that actually what we need to do is enforce the current regulations and prevent smuggling in the black market. And that's more of a law enforcement question than a regulatory question. So if you ask me, there's lots and lots of reasons not to choose this moment to do something so petty as to revise European vaping legislation. But I may be in the minority there.
Thank you. Yeah.
So to add something, I totally agree to Peter to add something. The core idea of EU is harmonization, so that's why we're talking about that. And what we see now, it's not only, we're not foreseeing what's coming with the TPD3 in detail, but we see what the effects are of TPD2. So TPD2 has led to a very differentiated regulatory landscape in Europe. And what we see, some countries introduced liquid taxes, others didn't. Some countries introduced flavor bans, others didn't. So there's a variety of regulatory moments there. And when we see, when I was talking about Germany, the association I'm speaking for, we had introduced, the government had introduced the liquid tax 2 years ago, and it comes in 4 steps. So we had 60 cents per milliliter volume tax 2 years ago. Last year it was about 20 cents. This year it's 26, and next year it will be 32 cents. Compared to what is going on in the EU, so from 27 member states, 20 have introduced liquid taxes, and the average is about 20 cents. So Germany now is 6 cents above that and will be 12 cents above that in the next year. And this is something, when we are talking about harmonization, that is Germany, but it's not in France. So in France, so far, they haven't introduced any liquid taxes. They are our neighbors, direct neighbors, and this is leading to really big problems for our members, for the resellers that we are speaking for. And the big problem is that there is illegal trade coming from France, for example, but other countries too, to Germany, and our members say their business is going down because of that. The illegal trade, and this is combined to everything we're talking about here, in Germany is 40% of the market, and is not a high example. There are other countries that are in the same direction. So this is, when you see the complex picture, this is what we are talking about. When regulation is too strict, too harsh, it will have an effect on the market, and the black market will go up, and the regulatory market will get down. One aspect more is flavor bans, but we can talk about this later.
Yes, thank you so much. I suggest talking about flavor ban right now, because actually it's another controversial issue in the regulatory debates, and also the data on its influence is still emerging. So for now, it would be valuable to explore whether bans lead to reduced usage or illicit trade market activity. How restricting flavors in nicotine pouches and e-cigarettes impacts consumer preferences, youth initiation, and adult cessation efforts.
Well, I can probably start. I'm going to say something that I believe everyone is thinking, but not everyone actually says it so clearly, especially to the legislators and so on. Flavor ban is probably the most stupid thing that anyone can ever do in a regulation or when regulating vaping products. It's certainly the most absurd decision that anyone can take. And not just because of the implications and the impacts for industry, but just because what you just said. They are arguing that with the flavor ban, they'll be able to change the pattern consumptions of segments of population. May that be the younger ones or the older ones. But what they are doing is confusing a little bit the reason why a flavor ban could be a potential useful tool. They say, no, I'm going to ban it because minors really like flavors. But minors, what they like is what adults like. The same way that they would like, I like apple, I like bananas, I like strawberry, and I'm pretty sure all of you do too. And whatever it is that an adult likes, it will be also something that a younger one will also like. But I don't think it's an element of initiation, no? And I'm here, there's plenty of studies that shows that it's not necessarily and when I say studies, I mean statistical studies, I mean the sociological analysis that are proving that it's not necessarily vaping what it's causing for younger ones to start smoking thereafter, and that's not the cause. Yeah, sorry. Finish up. With that, I think we all agree flavor bans are a stupid thing.
Not so much about the safety elements. I think it's how do you actually define and enforce what a flavour ban is? Because there's a very sort of broad range. I mean, we saw this several years ago. Juul put a self-imposed flavour ban on where they said, well, we are only going to sell menthol and tobacco. And then a few months later, you see summer menthol, ruby menthol. you know, tobacco is still a flavour. So it's either a tobacco flavoured product or technically it's a non-tobacco flavoured product, but you've got a whole broad range in between. So I'm struggling to see how they would actually define, implement and actually control something like that. And I think the other big risk as well, and we see this in the States, we're starting to see it in some of the EU countries as well, doing something like that creates that opportunity, that market opportunity to start introducing other products. So we're starting to see the nicotine analogues, so 6-methyl nicotine. So from a safety perspective, companies are exposing this loophole to say, hey, I'm not selling a nicotine-containing vape, and it's this flavour, I'm not regulated, and that market is at risk of increasing, and that introduces significant safety concerns.
Yeah, I mean, I was at Juul when they made that decision, and I found it as stupid and confounding as you found it. I think I can say that now. Couple of points coming off of that. First of all, you ask how do you ban a flavour? Well, what you do is you do what the Netherlands do, which is you create a list of chemicals that you're allowed to put in vaping products or in nicotine pouches or whatever, and then you tell manufacturers that that's their closed list. Well, who's going to control that? You'll just see what you see the whole way through the history of the vapor industry, which is the manufacturers who really want to comply with the law will spend a load of money doing it and then lose out in the market to the manufacturers who don't give a fuck. Now, again, let's take a step back. The public health argument such that it is that the flavours are a risk to kids, which will be news to the millions of adults who love flavoured vaping products and who are frequently told by public health types who probably act in as good a faith as they can that they don't actually exist and their preferences don't matter. Take that onto a political level, turn it into legislation and make the public debate it, and you get the worst kind of culture war that you can possibly imagine in political discourse, which is exactly the thing that we need to be trying to avoid in today's politics, lest we become more like the US. So there are a whole bunch of factors that lead to the conclusion that none of this makes sense either in its own terms or in the broader political context. So you just have to ask yourself, why are we doing it?
Absolutely, I agree. When it's coming to flavor bans destroy the whole regulatory market. So what we can see, what Peter mentioned, in the Netherlands, they introduced a flavor ban last year in January, and we heard from our contacts in the Netherlands that the whole regulated market went down and the black market went up. So this is something that is happening not only in the Netherlands, it has happened in the US, it is happening in Denmark, it's happening in Lithuania. We can see a very, very bad example of what is happening when governments are too harsh on restrictions. In Australia, Australia has the biggest black market in the world when it's coming to vaping. There are gangs in a war about this market, so this is a really, really bad development. And it's easy mathematics. When we're talking to our political contacts, we tell them, when you do A, you get B, there's nothing in between. And when you do, when you cut down flavors, when you take away the flavors, there are three things. The first is the attractiveness of vaping is going down because so many people are vaping because of the flavors. They stay with vaping because of the flavors. They don't get back to smoking. This is the first aspect. And the second aspect is the whole market will go down. So the argumentation, when you say what is the argument for the reason for introducing flavor bans, it comes from so many organizations that want to cut down vaping, and it's about, they say the youth uptake is going up. It's not true. When you see the figures in the US, the youth uptake of vaping is going down. When you see in other countries in the EU, it's the same. In Germany, we have, I would say, 1.5% of 14 to 17-year-olds that are vaping. It's 1.5%, and it's 14% of the same group that are smoking. So when you compare that, it's much more. And even those 1.5%, they have started their nicotine, as you can say, experience, not with vaping, but with smoking. So they were smokers before, and then they switched to vaping, which could be a very good development because then it's less harmful. So we're talking about all these complex things, and it's coming from organizations that we haven't mentioned so far. WHO is doing a very, very bad job on that. and it could cost lives, as we know, and it will cut down the market when it comes like this from the European Commission.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Well, basically, it's one of the issues, and ahead we have much more interesting questions. So the next one is cross-border sales and illicit trade risks. So if we talk about tighter regulations on cross-border online sales, we understand it might restrict consumer access to products in countries with stricter local regulations. And at the same time, it may increase illicit trade, undermining public health goals. So in this case, maintaining compliance across multiple jurisdictions becomes increasingly complex. So the question is, what measures can be implemented to prevent illegal trade without unfairly limiting consumer access to lower-risk nicotine products? And how can regulatory authorities collaborate internationally to enforce consistent standards across borders and minimize illicit sales? I'm sorry.
We've talked about that already because it's about harmonization. But what can we do to prevent illegal market coming up is do a good regulation. Do something that is sensible, something that is, for the people, for the market, for the public health. Then we don't talk about illicit trade. Don't put too high taxes on the products because then only the black market sellers will have a profit of that. Don't put any harsh restriction, as we said, then the regulation will be fine and everything can work out, and the public health will have an advantage of that.
Thank you. Peter, you had something to add?
I mean, it's kind of a nonsense debate, really. First of all, the TPD can do nothing about this because the European Union doesn't have a law enforcement mechanism. It's a regulatory body. So you're left to the enforcement priorities of the member states to determine whether or not they care about the illegal vape trade. And guess what? They don't, because they have limited police resources and there's quite a lot of crime that happens, and this is far down the list, as it should be. So let's think about this in a slightly more logical way. What drives the illegal market? What drives the illegal market fundamentally is people banning products that other people want. And when you do that, you sidestep the ability to control anything in the market. Nobody particularly wants to buy vapes out the back of a van. They do it because they can only get the thing that they want from the guy with the van. So what you ask any of the major vaping companies, you ask any, probably even the tobacco companies, they don't even see their competition as their legal competition. Every vape store owner I say says we're not competing with the vape store down the road. We're competing with the guy in the van down the road from that. And that's the thing you have to prevent. And you can only do that from law enforcement if you reallocate a whole bunch of law enforcement resources from things that are prioritized by people in the real world, like violent crime, which nobody is going to do. So let's have a sensible discussion about how to make products available in a way that is elegant and sophisticated, rather than just talking down to people. And the way you do that is not through the Tobacco Products Directive, it's through cooperation between law enforcement mechanisms in the member states and by stopping these ridiculous bans that we keep having.
Yeah, if I can be very brief on this one, I agree with both my colleagues here. I would just simply say, with a harmonized market, cross-border sales would never be a problem. That's an obvious, probably it's even an understatement, but the reason why this starts to be an element of concern is because in some markets you do have products that are allowed, and in some others you don't have that. And this is for me, the biggest issue at the moment. That, as you say, maybe TPD3 would not be able to address it, but at least what TPD3 needs to take into account is that the regulatory framework needs to be flexible enough or rapidly adaptable to the new market circumstances. Because otherwise we will see ourselves in the same scenario that we see ourselves today, where there's different markets that are regulating products because the market reality is different to other markets.
It shouldn't be the public health role of a bloke with vapes in a van to help people quit smoking, but that's where we are with these regulations. And we need to look at that reality, determine that it is reality, and do something about the reality that we see in front of us, rather than creating these false threats that we can build moral panics around and then act on them to make ourselves feel better when we go to bed at night. It doesn't do anything.
Thank you. Yes, Chris will actually reply the next question because it's directly related to the lab's role in shaping the nicotine future. So testing labs have a unique position at the intersection of science, industry, and regulation. So the main question here is what role should testing labs play in shaping future nicotine regulations, and how they can ensure that scientific findings can directly inform the policy making?
That's a rather potentially sort of long answer to that one. I think there's a lot that can be done. I think the first comment, what sort of stands out to me is, you know, we work in a number of different industries, but the collaboration within this industry across the testing laboratories, major companies, you know, we're members of Caresta, which has got members, yes, you know, through from big tobacco through to small independent companies. And the level of data sharing, scientific sharing, trying to create methodologies, standards, it's unrivaled in any other industry I've worked in. And we've got to somehow, how can we capture that and feed that into the standards? I think one of the biggest challenges with the TPD initially was, you know, it's simple things. How many replicas? What actual sensitivity of the methods do we require? Even something as simple, and I cannot believe this never sort of made it into the directive in the first place, what units to use. You know, how do you compare product to product when every single company is reporting different things in different ways?
This has given me nasty flashbacks to 10 years ago, to say that right now.
And that's still going on, and it's almost, to a degree, a lot of the testing that's done under TPD2 is virtually pointless. Nobody looks at it, there's no standard, there's no essentially sort of European-wide level that says, yes, some countries like France will set their individual standards, but we need to see more harmonisation across the board. Again, so you can, you know, we're talking harmonisation across the countries, how you can utilise that data for different countries without having to go into different test regimes based on different local standards.
Well, look, this is exactly, and I'm going to bang the same point over and over again. Right? If we were having a sensible conversation about how to regulate this industry, these are the things we were talking about. What units should we measure particulate matter in vapor in? Seems like a fairly basic thing to agree on if we're going to regulate these things. The problem is that we're not coming at it, and I say we, I mean the institutions that write these things, are not coming at it from that perspective. They're coming at it from a cultural perspective. And that's why you end up with all the problems in the market. If we want to have a sensible conversation about regulation, it would be boring, because we would be talking about units of measurement for particulate matter in vapor, and none of you would be here because it would be a rubbish debate to watch. But given, well, Chris would be here, yeah. Yeah, that's true. Chris would be here. Chris would be happy with it. But as for the rest of us, you know, actually, what the reason that this is fun to debate is because it's a weird culture war debate, and that's exactly the problem with it.
But I think this one is, sorry, I'm taking the floor here, but it's just saying, this is, for me, what TPD3 should be about. It should be a mega boring debate. It should be about data, PPMs, it should be about standards. It should not be a debate on public health, which is not. The public health improvement or the worsening of the public health status is a consequence of how do you implement TPD. But this is the big thing. But I have a quick question, sorry, and I know you want to challenge me on that one. But very quickly, my only big concern is that all these studies, everything that comes out of the labs, everything that we ask to measure, never reaches out the Commission, never reaches out the member states. How can we make all that much more appealing, attractive to them?
You guys are the lobbyists, so you probably know the best way into that. I think, again, it depends country by country. We do see a lot more engagement, certainly in the UK. Talked earlier about, you know, we've been working with trading standards to actually look at the nicotine pouch market to understand what's actually out there, what are the products like, what are the quality attributes. and they're looking at taking that information. We're now working with Department of Health in terms of trying to shape how that regulation should look. So I think that's a great example of a government actually saying, right, we're going to get out there, we're going to talk to people, we're going to listen. Whether or not they implement it is a different thing, but at least we're actually having that dialogue, which is just not consistent through the rest of Europe.
Political will, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, look, yeah, Chris, we are the lobbyists, but frankly, if we knew how to get that stuff out there and get people to rank the science in a sensible way, we'd have done it 10 years ago the first time we were trying to do this. The reality is that there is a big, well-funded machine that is coming after this business that is financed primarily by Bloomberg philanthropies and by large sections of the pharmaceutical industry. That's what's happening here. That's why you have such a skewed debate. Everybody talks about big tobacco as if they're this big monolithic block that controls the debate around tobacco and vaping and nicotine. Frankly, they're nowhere near it. The people who control this debate are the other side, and that's why you don't have you don't have an unbiased view of the science, because nobody seems to be unbiased in this world.
I absolutely agree. So what we have so far is we have so many scientific studies that are stating e-cigarettes, vaping is not a gateway to smoking. It's a harm reduction tool. There's so many studies about what are the consequences of flavor bans and so on. And when we see what the Commission is doing, we have the SKIR report some years ago, and the SKIR report is an example of in which direction they trend to go. It is about ignorance of positive studies. They only focus on negative studies, and this is what they introduce to the public. And this is something that is an example of in which direction they are heading in the moment. And I'm not naive, and I'm rather pessimistic that this would change.
Yeah, I wrote IAVA's response to that back in the day, and the first line of it was, well, the British government has said every single year for the last 5 years that vaping is 95% less harmful than smoking, and yet in this review of all of the science that you have spent 3 years putting together, you do not once reference Public Health England. Why? Nothing, right? It is selective use of the science that suits people's political agenda, and this is the problem. Now, how do you overcome that as a set of small businesses and consumers? Well, we've got to do a lot more than we are doing right now in terms of micro communications to decision makers. That's what Clearing the Air is trying to bring about. We've got a community of maybe 10,000 people a month that read our content, and hopefully some of you will join us after this. You can find me and I'll give you a link. And it's the only way that I've ever found that balances these things. It's the only way that we even have vaping today, because in 2013 the Commission wanted to ban it completely.
Yeah, and you make a very good point that I think it's going to be critical in this review. Speak up. I mean, everyone that is here should be ready to participate in the consultations of the Commission, to speak up and share what they think, what they believe. Also because the market is new, there's new categories, there's new players, there's new companies as well that are bringing up some innovation into the market, and they need to express themselves. And I think this is, if there's any key message on TPD3 right now, the most immediate one would be get ready, make sure you participate, and you understand what are the bases for that participation.
And to do that, sign up to clearingtheair.eu's mailing list, and we will let you know exactly when you need to do something.
So for speaking not only for the German association, but I'm working for EVO, the European Association too. So what I can say and support what Jacobo said before, please support us in our fight, because we're actually fighting, we're actually trying to convince our political contacts. We're trying to not only convince, but to educate. Maybe you start by zero, then you have to explain everything from the bottom. So this is what we are doing, and if you're not supporting the associations this moment, please join the association, because we are fighting for you.
Thank you. It was really a very engaging question, but we have some ahead as well. So the next one is about product standards and composition. So the upcoming regulation may potentially bring changes related to stricter control on nicotine content, chemical additives, strengths, and ingredients that pose challenges for manufacturers in reformulating products while maintaining consumer satisfaction. And the main industry concern in this regard is adapting to these changes that could increase production costs and reduce product diversity. So what are the unintended consequences of limiting nicotine strengths and additives for both manufacturers and consumers? Maybe Philip, you would... Okay, Jacoba.
And someone must correct me here if I'm wrong, but I do not see any problems with limiting the nicotine content of any product. And I don't see any problem. It's we're talking about balancing regulation, and that comes along with some logic, common sense decisions here. So an unintended consequence of limiting the content of nicotine in products, in nicotine pouches, in vaping products, etc., could be that the regulator for the first time looks at you with good eyes and believes that you have a point. And as regards the content of on the additives, I think you made a very good point here. It's not so much about regulating flavors, but as much as regulating what sort of components does each of the liquids of the vaping products have, what are the most suitable for consumption, which ones are not. Same for nicotine pouches and for any other nicotine product.
I think there's a slight issue in that there's logic that applies, but I mean, if we look back when TPD2 was implemented, there was logic there in terms of the total tank size limit. Sat there at 2 millilitres, but most of the products on the market were generally cigar-like, so nobody saw an issue with that. But the problem we face now is that restriction is what's driving the illicit market, certainly within the UK, because people want higher volumes. So that regulation has not adapted. And I agree, I think you've got a big challenge here because you've got the two extremes of the market. Somebody asked earlier about the US market and what are the restrictions there? And basically, there aren't any, because it's down to the applicant to prove that that product is appropriate for the protection of public health.
And also, everybody at Centre for Tobacco Products at FDA got fired yesterday, so there's nobody to enforce it anyway.
Aside from that, but almost have got to think, is it unreasonable to think in, 5 years' time, somebody has a nicotine pouch with 100 milligrams of nicotine in it, it has a perfect release profile that lasts all day. You then have a product that consumers want, there's less waste, it's probably going to cost them less, it's more convenient, it's more discreet, they're not taking pouches out of the mouth every hour. You've created a product that the consumer actually wants that no longer sits within that regulation. So I think, logically, yes, I'm 100% behind stopping all these pouches that we're seeing 50, 100, 150 milligrams of nicotine, but we've got to learn from the past and not put something in that's actually going to drive an illicit market in the future.
You know what your problem is, Chris? You're far too logical about this stuff. That's not how these decisions get made. I'll tell you a story of how we ended up at 20 mg per mil and 10 mil bottles in the current tobacco directive. I went for a meeting with the European Commission alongside his old boss, his old client, and my old client. And they asked us, what's the average nicotine content that vapers use? And we said, well, about average, it's around 18 at the moment. And they said, okay, and what's the average bottle size that consumers use? And at the time, it was 10 mils, so we said 10 mils. We get the minutes of that meeting a week later, and they go, oh, the industry say they will be fine with a 20 milligram per milliliter limit and 10 mil bottles. We have to then put out a press release saying, no, we did not say that. They asked for the average, but the damage had been done. They had decided that we had said that we were okay with these regulations, therefore that was what they put to council and that was what we got. This is not done on the basis of some Chris Allen-like calculation about what is logical and what makes sense in terms of public health and science. This is done on the basis that they want to ban stuff in order to ban stuff. That is what we're up against here. So I take all of these points, and they're all very good points, but those are not the things that people are going to be weighing when they decide which part of the market they want to ban.
Yes, absolutely. So the discussion about where vapes should be sold was in 2013, and we remember this very good. There was a discussion outside of the European Parliament, and there was a plan to ban those products from the free sales and put them only in the pharmacies. So it was a very close call. I remember this day that we're sitting in our offices, and you know, the close call, when it goes on the other side, we wouldn't be sitting here, we wouldn't be working in this whole industry since 12 years now. So this is something, when we you know, try to convince our political contacts, this whole thing of nicotine content got mandatory. So it was that we didn't have any chance. There are, you know, positions against it from the scientific side. There are positions in favor of it. I think leave it like that. We need a balance. We need a limit, and we don't have to open another, you know, negative showcase for our industry.
Thank you very much. Actually, the topic is so interesting and so controversial that basically we had 4 or 5 more questions to discuss. But still, I hope the experts will be here the whole day, so in case you meet them in the halls, you can just negotiate on different aspects which TPD3 may potentially bring. But still, one more question I would like to ask is about packaging and labeling. Why it's important? Because if we talk about labeling, and in this case, if we talk about marketing, advertising of the products, this can affect branding and product differentiation, right? So plain packaging, it can reduce brand visibility, impact consumer loyalty, and market competition. So in this context, the question is how to avoid restricting marketing avenues which may hinder market growth and product awareness. Maybe you can comment on this. Yes.
Ooh, hang on. Ooh, my favorite subject.
Peter, you can do
My favorite subject. So, when we talk about responsible packaging, and they talk about responsible packaging, we are talking about completely different things. Let's start there. When we say it, we're saying, do we need a pictogram because of the nicotine content of this? Do we need something to help blind people figure out what a product is when they take it off the shelf by using Braille? You know, what warnings do we need? Do we need this? Do we need that? What the public health establishment is thinking is we couldn't care less about any of that stuff. How do we make it the people who are buying this feel as miserable as possible when they buy it? That's what they're thinking there. So let's get into that mindset. How do you get actual packaging artwork? Because they don't care about, nobody reads that stuff on the back. What they care about is, can you make the package less pink with fewer gummy bears on the front of it? That's really what we're talking about here. And there's a very, very simple regulatory mechanism that you could implement tomorrow in order to make that happen overnight. All you have to do is you let manufacturers tell the truth about their product on their packaging. This thing's way safer than smoking, and it'll help you quit. You do that, all of the stuff that the public health nuts like goes away overnight. We're not having that debate right now. So look, I'll leave it there. I'll let you guys talk about CLP and health warnings and whatever nonsense that there is right now. But the reality is, when you think about this debate, that's the way you need to think about it.
So let me add one point. TPD2 has banned advertising for vaping products outside of POS, and you know, we haven't talked about this, you know, bad knowledge in the public about vaping. So most of the people in every country, it's in Germany, it's in UK, it's in France, they don't believe that vaping is less harmful than smoking. Not they all, but it's a small fraction of people that know that vaping is less harmful. And this is something we have to, you know, we have to convince those people. And without advertising, it's very hard. And without, you know, even labeling some, you know, things on the package with plain package, it's even harder. So we have to keep these little chances we have to convince the public about this, you know, possible switch, to convince smokers in first draw, And this is something we can do and we can't do when it's getting, cutted anymore and on POS and plain packaging.
Thank you. So at this point, you can probably just check. There are far more questions to discuss. It's like environmental sustainability. It may be public health and harm reduction. So a lot of space for further exploration. And I'm very grateful for your lively discussion today. Thank you so very much for coming here, and I hope you can proceed individually with those willing to obtain some answers on the topic. Thank you so very much, and thank you, audience, for being here with us.